What they feared most is now standing right in front of them. Face your own creation. Look at me, right now. Look directly at me, because what I'm about to tell you is going to be uncomfortable. It's going to be disturbing. It's going to make you want to look away. Close this video. Pretend you never heard it, but you can't. Because somewhere deep inside, you already know what I'm about to say. You've always known. You've just been running from it. What you fear most, the thing that keeps you up at night, that shadow that follows you through every decision, that nightmare you can't quite remember but can always feel. It's not out there. It's not some external force. It's not bad luck or cruel fate or the universe conspiring against you. It's you. You created it. You fed it. You shaped it with every choice you made, every truth you avoided, every time you looked away from what you knew you should face. And now, after all this time, after all that avoidance, after all those years of pretending it wasn't there, it's standing right in front of you. Solid, real, undeniable. The thing you feared most is your own creation. And you can't run anymore because there's nowhere left to run. This isn't motivational speaking. This isn't positive psychology wrapped in dark aesthetics. This is the brutal, unvarnished truth about human nature that most people spend their entire lives avoiding. This is what Carl Jung understood when he talked about the shadow. This is what every ancient wisdom tradition knew, but modern society has forgotten. This is what separates people who transform their lives from people who stay trapped in the same patterns for decades. You are not a victim of circumstances. You are not powerless against fate. You are the architect of your own hell. And the sooner you understand that, the sooner you can start rebuilding. Stand here with me. Don't look away. Let's examine exactly how you got here. Let's trace the steps backward, following the breadcrumbs of choices and avoidances that led you to this moment where you're standing face to face with the monster you created. It started small. It always starts small. A little lie you told yourself. A truth you didn't want to face. A conversation you avoided. A decision you postponed. A feeling you buried. A dream you abandoned because it was too scary to pursue. A part of yourself you rejected because it didn't fit the image you wanted to project. Each one seemed insignificant at the time. Each one was easy to justify. I'll deal with it later. It's not the right time. I'm protecting myself. I'm being realistic. I'm being responsible. All very reasonable. All very sensible. All very deadly. Because here's what you didn't understand. Every time you avoided something, every time you pushed something down, every time you refused to face a truth, you weren't making it go away. You were feeding it. You were giving it power. You were allowing it to grow in the darkness while you pretended it didn't exist. Jung called this the shadow. The part of yourself you reject, deny, repress. The thoughts you won't think. The feelings you won't feel. The desires you won't acknowledge. The fears you won't face. All of it gets pushed down into the unconscious where it doesn't disappear. It grows. It ferments. It gains power. It becomes something far more dangerous than it ever would have been if you just faced it in the first place. And now it's big enough that you can't ignore it anymore. Now it's standing right in front of you, demanding to be acknowledged. Now you have to face what you created. Let me tell you what this looks like in real life, because I know some of you are still trying to intellectualize this, still try to keep it abstract and philosophical, so you don't have to look at your own situation. The person who avoided conflict their whole life, who said yes when they meant no, who swallowed their truth to keep the peace. They wake up one day surrounded by people who don't know them, in a life they don't recognize, suffocating under the weight of resentment they've been accumulating for years. The explosion they feared, the confrontation, the anger, the rejection, it's not a possibility anymore. It's inevitable. It's here. And it's 10 times worse than it would have been if they'd had the courage to speak their truth along the way. The person who buried their anger, who prided themselves on being calm and rational, who never let themselves feel the full force of their rage. They don't eliminate the anger. They just push it down where it becomes something else. Depression, passive aggression, mysterious physical ailments, self-sabotage. And one day, often at the worst possible moment, it erupts in a way they can't control. The very thing they were trying to prevent by suppressing their anger. Losing control happens anyway, but with years of accumulated force behind it. The person who ran from their ambitions because they were afraid of failure, who played it safe, who convinced themselves they were being humble or realistic. They don't escape the pain of failure. They just trade it for the much worse pain of regret. And that regret grows every single day, getting heavier, until they're carrying around the weight of all the lives they didn't live, all the versions of themselves they could have been. The failure they feared was temporary. The regret is permanent. The person who avoided intimacy because they were afraid of being hurt and kept people at arm's length, who built walls to protect themselves. They don't avoid pain. They just trade the risk of heartbreak for the certainty of loneliness. And loneliness, unlike heartbreak, doesn't heal with time. It compounds. It deepens. Until one day, they realize the walls they built to keep pain out have become a prison keeping them in. Do you see the pattern? Do you see what's happening? The thing you were afraid of, the thing you organized your entire life around avoiding. You didn't avoid it. You just delayed it, amplified it, and ensured it would arrive at the worst possible time in the worst possible form. You created exactly what you feared, not despite your efforts to avoid it. Because of them. This is the cruel joke of avoidance. This is a trap that most people fall into and never escape. They think they're protecting themselves. They think they're being smart, strategic, careful. But they're actually constructing their own nightmare. Brick by brick, choice by choice, avoidance by avoidance. And the worst part? Deep down you knew. You always knew. There was a voice inside you, quiet but persistent, telling you that you couldn't run forever. Telling you that this approach wasn't working. Telling you that you needed to face it. But you ignored that voice because listening to it would have required courage. It would have required discomfort. It would have required you to stop pretending and start dealing with reality. So you kept running. You kept avoiding. You kept building your monster. And now it's big enough that you can't pretend anymore. Now it's standing in front of you, undeniable, demanding your attention. And here's the thing that nobody wants to hear. This is good. This is actually the best thing that could have happened to you. Not because it's comfortable, not because it's easy, but because you finally have no choice but to deal with it. You finally have to face what you've been running from. See, as long as you could avoid it, you would. As long as there was an escape route, you'd take it. Human nature. We're wired to avoid pain in the short term, even if it creates more pain in the long term. We're wired to take the easy path, even if it leads to a harder destination. We're wired to choose comfort over growth. But when there's no escape, when avoidance is no longer an option, when you're cornered by your own creation and you have to face it, that's when transformation becomes possible. That's when you finally have the opportunity to deal with what needed to be dealt with all along. This is the dark gift of hitting bottom. This is the paradoxical blessing of having your avoidance strategies fail. This is why some people only transform after losing everything, after their carefully constructed life collapses, after they can't run anymore. Not because suffering itself is valuable, but because it finally forces them to face what they've been avoiding. You're there now, or you're getting close. That's why you're here, listening to these words. Some part of you knows that the reckoning is coming. Some part of you understands that you can't keep running. Some part of you is ready, terrified, but ready, to finally face your own creation. So let's talk about how you do that. Because understanding that you created the problem is only the first step. The real work is learning to face it, integrate it, transform it. The real work is taking ownership not just intellectually, but viscerally, in your bones, in your daily actions. First, you have to stop the stories. You know the ones I'm talking about. The narratives you've been telling yourself about why your life is the way it is. The explanations that make you the victim and circumstances the villain. The carefully constructed justifications for why you couldn't have done anything differently. I had a difficult childhood. People don't understand me. The world is against people like me. I never got the breaks other people got. If only X had happened differently, everything would be different. Maybe all of that is true. Maybe you did have legitimate obstacles. Maybe life was unfair to you. Maybe other people did fail you. I'm not here to debate the accuracy of your story. I'm here to tell you that clinging to that story is killing you. Because as long as you're the victim in your narrative, you're powerless. As long as circumstances are to blame, you can't change anything. As long as your problems are caused by external forces, you're stuck waiting for those external forces to change. And they won't. They never do. you'll wait forever. But when you take ownership, radical, complete, uncompromising ownership, everything changes. When you look at your life and say, I created this, every part of it, with my choices, my avoidances, my actions, and inactions. I created this. That's terrifying. That's the hardest thing you'll ever do. But it's also liberating. Because if you created it, you can change it. If you built this prison, you can dismantle it. If you fed this monster, you can starve it. Ownership isn't about blame. It's not about beating yourself up or wallowing in guilt. It's about reclaiming your power. It's about moving from this happened to me to I'm creating my reality. It's about understanding that you're not a passive recipient of life. You're an active participant. And once you truly understand that, once you feel it in your gut, the next step becomes clear. You have to face what you've been avoiding, directly, completely, without numbing, without distraction, without the defense mechanisms you've been using to protect yourself. If you've been avoiding conflict, you need to have the difficult conversations, all of them, the ones you've been postponing for years, with your partner, your parents, your boss, yourself. You need to say what needs to be said, ask what needs to be asked, express what needs to be expressed, not aggressively, not to hurt anyone, but honestly, authentically, without hiding behind politeness or people-pleasing or fear. If you've been suppressing emotions, you need to feel them fully, without judgment, without trying to fix them or change them or understand them. Just feel them. Rage, grief, terror, shame, whatever you've been pushing down, whatever you've been medicating with work or food or substances or distraction. You need to stop running and let yourself actually feel it, not forever. Emotions, when you actually let yourself experience them, move through you. But you have to stop blocking them. If you've been hiding from your ambitions, you need to admit what you actually want, not what you think you should want, not what would be reasonable or realistic or safe, what you actually want. That dream you buried because it seemed impossible. That version of yourself you gave up on because you were afraid of failing. That life you've been pretending you don't want because wanting it and not having it hurts too much. You need to admit it out loud to yourself. And then you need to take one step toward it. Just one. Today, if you've been avoiding intimacy, you need to let someone in. Really in. Past the walls. Past the performance. Past the carefully curated version of yourself you show the world. You need to let someone see the parts of you that you think are unlovable. Not because you're guaranteed acceptance. You're not. But because staying hidden is a form of slow death. And the risk of rejection is better than the certainty of never being truly known. This is the work. This is what it means to face your own creation. This is what integration looks like. You stop running. You stop avoiding. You stop pretending. And you turn around and look directly at what you've been afraid of. And you'll discover something interesting. It's still scary. It's still hard. But it's not as bad as you thought. It never is. The anticipation, the dread, the years of avoidance. Those were worse than the actual confrontation. The monster in your imagination was bigger than the reality. The thing you've been running from, when you finally turn around and face it, you realize you can handle it. It doesn't destroy you. It transforms you. But you have to actually do it. You can't just understand this intellectually. You can't just agree with the philosophy and then go back to your patterns. You have to act. You have to do the scary thing. You have to face what you've been avoiding. Today. Now. Not when you feel ready. You'll never feel ready. Not when the timing is perfect. The timing will never be perfect. Now, let me tell you what happens when you do this. When you actually face your shadow instead of running from it. When you integrate what you've been rejecting. When you take ownership of your own creation. First there's relief. Profound relief. The energy you've been spending on avoidance. And it's enormous, even if you don't realize it. Suddenly becomes available for other things. You didn't know how exhausting it was to run until you stopped running. You didn't know how much mental bandwidth was being used to keep certain thoughts at bay, to maintain certain stories, to avoid certain feelings. When you stop fighting reality and start accepting it, when you stop avoiding and start facing, the relief is immediate. Second, there's clarity. When you're not spending all your energy on avoidance and justification, you can actually see your situation clearly. You can see the patterns. You can see how you got here. You can see what needs to change. The fog lifts, the confusion dissipates. Not because your situation got simpler, but because you stopped lying to yourself about it. Third, there's power. Real power. Not the fake power of pretending you're in control while you're actually being controlled by your fears. Real power. The power that comes from knowing yourself completely, accepting yourself fully, and acting from that place of integrity. When you're not hiding from parts of yourself. When you've integrated your shadow. When you face what you've been avoiding. You become unstoppable. Not because you're suddenly perfect or fearless, but because you're no longer sabotaging yourself. You're no longer fighting yourself. All of your energy is aligned in one direction instead of being split between moving forward and holding yourself back. Fourth, there's authenticity. You stop performing. You stop pretending. You stop maintaining the false version of yourself that you thought people would accept. And paradoxically, you become more acceptable. People are drawn to authenticity. They're repelled by performance. Even if they can't consciously identify what feels off, when you stop trying to be likable and just be real, you become magnetic. Not to everyone. Some people will reject the real you, but to the right people, the people who matter, the people who can actually see you and connect with you. Fifth, there's growth. Real growth. Not self-improvement as a form of self-rejection. Not trying to become someone else because you hate who you are, but actual growth, expansion, evolution. You start becoming more of who you actually are instead of trying to become who you think you should be. And that's when life starts working. That's when opportunities appear. That's when synchronicities happen. That's when you start attracting what you actually want instead of what you think you're supposed to want. But all of this requires the first step, the hardest step, the step that most people never take. You have to stop running and turn around. You have to face your own creation. You have to look directly at the thing you've been most afraid of and acknowledge. I created this. I fed this. This is mine. And then this is crucial. You have to stop feeding it. Because here's what happens with shadows, with suppressed parts of yourself, with the things you've been avoiding. As long as you keep feeding them through avoidance, they grow. But when you face them, acknowledge them, integrate them, they lose their power. Not because they disappear, but because they become part of you instead of working against you. The rage you've been suppressing, when you acknowledge it, feel it, understand where it comes from, it transforms into healthy boundaries and righteous action. The fear you've been running from, when you face it directly, it transforms into wisdom and careful consideration. The grief you've been avoiding, when you let yourself actually feel it, it transforms into compassion and depth. The shame you've been hiding, when you bring it into the light, it loses its power completely because shame can only survive in darkness. This is alchemy. This is transformation. This is what the ancient mystery schools taught, and what modern psychology has rediscovered. You take what's dark and hidden and rejected, and by bringing it into consciousness, by facing it, by integrating it, you transform it from poison into medicine. But you have to do the work, and the work is simple but not easy. Stop running. Face what you've been avoiding. Take ownership of what you've created. Stop the stories that make you powerless. Start acting from truth instead of fear. Listen, I need you to pause right here for a moment. If what I'm saying is landing, if you're starting to see your own patterns in what I'm describing, if you're beginning to understand what you've been running from, I need you to do something. Hit that like button right now. Not just because it helps this content reach more people who need to hear it, but because clicking that button is you making a commitment. You're committing to stop running. You're committing to face what you've been avoiding. You're committing to take ownership of your own creation. And drop a comment below. Tell me one thing you've been avoiding that you know you need to face. Just naming it. Just bringing it into the light. That's the first step. And subscribe to this channel because we're just getting started. There's so much more to explore about the psychology of transformation, about facing your shadow, about becoming who you're actually capable of being. Do it now. Make that commitment to yourself before we go deeper. Now let's talk about something that trips people up. They hear this message. Face your fears, integrate your shadow, take ownership, and they think they understand it. They intellectually grasp the concept. They agree with it. They might even feel inspired by it. And then they do nothing. Or worse, they do the psychological equivalent of window shopping. They examine their fears from a safe distance. They think about their shadow without actually engaging with it. They acknowledge their avoidance without actually changing it. This is spiritual bypassing. This is using wisdom teachings as another form of avoidance. This is pretending to do the work without actually doing the work. And it's incredibly common because it feels like progress while requiring no actual risk, no actual discomfort, no actual change. So let me be brutally clear about what facing your creation actually means. It's not meditation. It's not journaling. It's not therapy, though therapy can support the process. It's not reading books about psychology or watching videos about self-improvement. All of those things can be useful tools, but they're not the work itself. The work is action. Specific, concrete, uncomfortable action in the real world with real consequences. If you're avoiding conversation, the work is having the conversation, not thinking about having it, not preparing for it forever, actually opening your mouth and saying the words that scare you. If you're suppressing an emotion, the work is feeling it, not analyzing it, not understanding where it comes from, actually letting your body experience it fully, without trying to fix it or change it or make it go away. If you're hiding from your ambitions, the work is taking a real step toward them, not planning, not visualizing, not preparing until you're ready, actually doing something concrete today that moves you closer to what you want, even if you're terrified of failing. If you're avoiding intimacy, the work is being vulnerable with a real person, not in theory, not in your imagination, not with a therapist who's paid to listen, with an actual person in your life who might reject you, might judge you, might not understand. That's the risk that makes it real. This is what separates transformation from entertainment. This is what separates people who change their lives from people who just consume content about changing their lives. Action, in the real world, with real stakes. And here's why this is so important. Your psychology, your unconscious patterns, your shadow. They're not abstract concepts. They're living, dynamic forces that express themselves through your behavior. You can't change them by thinking about them. You can only change them by acting differently, by doing the thing that scares you, by facing what you've been avoiding. The shift happens in the doing, not in the understanding. Carl Jung said, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. But making the unconscious conscious isn't just an intellectual exercise. It's not just becoming aware of your patterns. It's actually interrupting those patterns through different behavior. It's catching yourself in the moment of avoidance and choosing differently. It's feeling the impulse to run and standing still instead. It's recognizing the old pattern trying to reassert itself and consciously choosing a new response. This is hard. This is why most people don't do it. It's much easier to consume content about transformation than to actually transform. It's much easier to understand your problems than to solve them. It's much easier to know what you should do than to actually do it. But understanding without action is worse than ignorance. At least when you don't know better, you have an excuse. But when you understand your patterns, when you know what you're avoiding, when you can see clearly how you're sabotaging yourself, and you still don't change, that's not ignorance. That's cowardice. That's choosing comfort over growth. That's deciding that your fear is more important than your potential. And I say this not to shame you, but to wake you up. Because somewhere along the way, society convinced you that awareness equals change. That understanding your problems is the same as solving them. That knowing about your shadow is the same as integrating it. And none of that is true. Awareness is just the first step. Understanding is just the beginning. The real work, the work that actually changes your life, comes after. So what does this look like practically? How do you actually face what you've been avoiding? How do you integrate your shadow? How do you take ownership of your creation? You start by identifying a pattern, not just intellectually, but experientially. You catch yourself in the act of avoidance. You notice the moment we want to have a difficult conversation, but you find a reason to put off. You feel the impulse to suppress an emotion, and you recognize it for what it is. You become aware of the story you're telling yourself about why you can't take action toward your goals. And then this is the key. Instead of following the pattern, you pause. Just for a moment. You create a gap between the impulse and the action. You break the automaticity. You insert consciousness into a process that's been running unconsciously for years. In that gap, that moment of awareness, you have a choice. You can follow the old pattern, avoid the conversation, suppress the emotion, tell yourself the limiting story. Or you can choose differently. You can do the thing that scares you. You can feel what you've been avoiding feeling. You can act despite the fear. The first time you do this will be terrifying. Your entire nervous system will be screaming at you to stop, to go back to the familiar pattern, to choose comfort over growth. Your mind will generate 1,000 reasons why now isn't the right time, why you're not ready, why this approach won't work. That's normal. That's your psychological immune system trying to maintain homeostasis, trying to keep things the same because change, even positive change, feels threatening to the part of you that just wants to survive. But you do it anyway. You feel the fear and you act anyway. You notice the resistance and you move forward anyway. You hear all the reasons why you shouldn't and you do it anyway. And something shifts. Maybe not dramatically. Maybe just a tiny crack in the wall you built. Maybe just a small release of the tension you've been carrying. Maybe just a glimpse of what's possible when you're not controlled by your fears. That's enough. That's the seed. Because what you've just proven to yourself is that you can do hard things. You can face what you've been avoiding. You can survive the discomfort. You're stronger than your fears. And then you do it again, the next day, the next time the pattern shows up, the next opportunity to choose differently. Each time gets a little easier. Not because the fear goes away, it doesn't, not really, but because you're building evidence that you can handle it. You're creating a new pattern. You're training yourself to face instead of avoid. This is how transformation happens. Not through one big dramatic change, but through thousands of small choices to act differently. Not through suddenly becoming a different person, but through gradually reinforcing new patterns while starving old ones. Not through eliminating fear, but through developing the capacity to act despite fear. Over time, something remarkable happens. The things that used to terrify you become manageable. The patterns that used to run your life lose their power. The shadow you've been running from becomes integrated. You start to recognize it when it shows up, but instead of being controlled by it, you can work with it. You understand it. You made peace with it. And the creation you were so afraid of, the monster you built through years of avoidance, it doesn't disappear, but it transforms. It becomes something you can manage, something you can work with. Sometimes, if you're willing to fully integrate it, it becomes a source of power rather than a source of fear. The rage becomes righteous anger that fuels necessary change. The fear becomes discernment that keeps you from being reckless. The grief becomes compassion that allows you to connect deeply with others. The shame becomes humility that makes you human and relatable. The ambition you suppress becomes drive that propels you forward. The need for intimacy you avoided becomes connection that makes life meaningful. Everything you rejected, everything you pushed into shadow, everything you tried to kill off or deny, it all had purpose. It all had energy that could have been used constructively if you'd only had the courage to face it and integrate it instead of suppressing it and letting it become toxic. This is what Jung meant by integrating the shadow. This is what ancient wisdom traditions meant by facing the demon and turning it into an ally. This is what modern psychology means by processing trauma and integrating dissociated parts. Different languages, same truth. You can't eliminate the parts of yourself you don't like. You can only integrate them or be controlled by them. There is no third option. So now we come to the question that's probably been building in your mind. What happens if you don't do this? What happens if you keep running? What happens if you refuse to face what you've created? Simple, it gets worse. The monster gets bigger. The shadow gets darker. The pattern gets more entrenched. The price gets higher. Because reality doesn't care about your avoidance. Life doesn't stop making demands just because you're not ready to meet them. The confrontation you're postponing doesn't go away. It compounds. With interest. With escalating consequences. The conversation you're avoiding now will be harder next year. The emotion you're suppressing now will be more explosive when it finally erupts. The dream you're denying now will become a heavier regret every year you don't pursue it. The intimacy you're running from now will leave you more isolated and disconnected the longer you avoid it. And eventually, and this is the part people don't want to hear, eventually you won't have a choice anymore. Eventually, Life will force the confrontation. Not gently, not conveniently, not when you're ready, but catastrophically, through crisis, through collapse, through loss that can't be avoided or explained away. This is what hitting bottom means. This is why some people only change after they lose everything. Not because suffering is noble or necessary, but because some people will literally not face their shadow until they have no other choice. They'll avoid and avoid and avoid until avoidance is no longer possible. Until the consequences of avoidance become so severe that facing reality, as painful as it is, becomes less painful than continuing to run. You can wait for that if you want. You can keep running until you hit the wall. Some people do. Some people have to. But understand what you're choosing. You're choosing to make the inevitable harder. You're choosing to amplify the very thing you're afraid of. You're choosing crisis over growth, catastrophe over conscious change. Or you can choose differently. Right now, today, you can decide to face what you've been avoiding before life forces you to. You can integrate your shadow consciously instead of waiting for it to explode unconsciously. You can take ownership of what you created while you still have some control over how the transformation unfolds. This is agency. This is power. Not the power to control everything, but the power to choose how you respond to what you can't control. The power to face your fears voluntarily instead of waiting to be forced. The power to dismantle your own prison before it becomes too strong to escape from. And here's what very few people understand. Voluntary discomfort is always easier than involuntary suffering. Choosing to face your fears is always less painful than being forced to face them by circumstances. Conscious transformation is always more manageable than unconscious crisis. When you choose to face what you've been avoiding, you get to do it on your terms. You can prepare. You can get support. You can move at a pace that's challenging but not overwhelming. You maintain some control over the process. But when life forces the confrontation, when your avoidance strategies finally fail, when reality crashes through your defenses, you don't get any of that. You face it in crisis mode. You face it alone. You face it without preparation or support or control. And it's brutal. I've seen both paths. I've watched people transform consciously, gradually, through deliberate practice and facing their fears incrementally. And I've watched people hit bottom hard, losing everything they were trying to protect, being forced to face what they've been avoiding in the most painful way possible. Both paths work. Both paths lead to transformation eventually, but one is chosen and managed. The other is chaotic and devastating. One preserves dignity and agency. The other strips them away before giving them back. Which path do you want? Because make no mistake, you're on one of these paths right now. You're either consciously facing what you've been avoiding, or you're unconsciously moving toward the moment when you'll be forced to face it. There's no standing still. There's no avoiding indefinitely. There's only the choice between conscious transformation and unconscious crisis. So I'm asking you, what are you waiting for? What needs to happen before you're willing to face what you've been avoiding? What needs to be lost before you're willing to take ownership of what you've created? What pain needs to accumulate before you're willing to do the work that would prevent it? Because here's the truth that might save you years of suffering. You're not going to feel ready. You're not going to wake up one day suddenly courageous enough to face your fears. You're not going to wait until the perfect moment when it doesn't scare you anymore. That moment will never come. Courage isn't the absence of fear. It's action despite fear. Readiness isn't a feeling. It's a decision. The right time isn't something you wait for. It's something you create by acting now. So stop waiting. Stop preparing. Stop finding reasons why now isn't the moment. Turn around and face what you've been running from. Look at what you've created. Take ownership of it and start the work of transformation now. Today, this moment. What conversation have you been avoiding? Have it today. What emotion have you been suppressing? Feel fully right now. What dream have you been denying? Take one concrete step toward it before the day ends. What vulnerability have you been hiding? Share it with someone who matters. Not tomorrow. Not when you feel ready. Not when the circumstances are better. Now, because every moment you wait, the shadow grows stronger. Every day you avoid, the pattern gets more entrenched. Every week you postpone, the crisis moves closer. and the price of transformation only goes up with time. But when you act now, when you face what you've been avoiding today, something miraculous happens. The energy you've been using to run suddenly becomes available for growth. The fear that was controlling you starts to lose its power. The pattern starts to break. The shadow starts to integrate. And you begin to discover something that's been true all along, but that you couldn't see while you were running. You're capable of handling this. You're stronger than your fears. You're more resilient than you knew. That discovery, that experiential knowledge that you can face what scares you and survive it. That's the foundation of real confidence. Not the fake confidence of pretending you have it all together. Not the fragile confidence that depends on everything going well. But the unshakable confidence that comes from knowing you can handle whatever life throws at you because you've already faced your worst fears and you're still here. That's what's waiting on the other side of avoidance. That's what you gain by facing your own creation. That's the gift hidden in the shadow. But you can only access it by doing the one thing you've been most afraid to do. Stop running and turn around. So here we are at the moment of truth. You've heard the message. You understand the pattern. You recognize yourself in what I'm describing. The question is, what are you going to do about it? Because information without action is just entertainment. Understanding without change is just procrastination. Awareness without behavior shift is just another form of avoidance. You know what you need to face. You've known all along. There's a part of you that's been whispering it quietly but persistently for months or years or decades. That thing you keep not thinking about. That conversation you keep not having. That truth you keep not speaking. That risk you keep not taking. That feeling you keep not feeling. You know, you've always known. The only question is whether you're finally ready to stop pretending you don't know. Whether you're ready to stop running. Whether you're ready to face what you created. And I want to be very clear about something. I can't make you do this. No one can. This is your choice. Your life. Your responsibility. I can show you the pattern. I can explain the psychology. I can illuminate the path. But I can't walk it for you. Only you can do that. And some of you won't. Some of you will watch this video, feel inspired for a moment, and then go right back to your patterns. You'll find reasons why your situation is different, why this doesn't apply to you, why now isn't the right time. You'll go back to sleep, back to avoidance, back to running, and that's your choice. I have no judgment about it, but I do want you to be honest with yourself about what you're choosing and why. But some of you will actually do it. You'll turn off this video and you'll take action. You'll have the conversation. You'll feel the feeling. You'll take a step. You'll face what you've been avoiding. And your life will begin to change. Not magically, not overnight, but gradually, consistently, powerfully. And as your life changes, as you integrate your shadow, as you take ownership of what you created and start creating something new, something remarkable happens. You become the person you were always capable of being. Not someone else, not someone perfect, but someone whole, someone authentic, someone powerful in the truest sense of the word. You stop living in reaction to your fears and start living in alignment with your values. You stop performing for approval and start acting from integrity. You stop avoiding and start engaging. You stop running and start standing. And in that standing, in that facing, in that integration, you discover a strength you didn't know you had, a clarity you didn't know was possible, a freedom you didn't believe existed. That's what's waiting on the other side of avoidance. That's what you gain by facing your shadow. That's the transformation that becomes possible when you finally stop running and turn around. The thing you've been most afraid of, the monster you created through years of avoidance. It's standing right in front of you now, undeniable, unavoidable, demanding to be faced. This is your moment. This is your opportunity. This is your crisis or your catalyst, depending on how you choose to meet it. So what's it going to be? Are you going to keep running, keep avoiding, keep feeding the monster until it consumes everything? Or are you finally ready to face your own creation? The choice is yours. It always has been. The power is yours. It always has been. The responsibility is yours. It always has been. You created this. Now it's time to face it. And in facing it, to transform it, to integrate it, to reclaim all the energy and power and potential that you locked away in shadow, to become whole instead of fragmented, to live authentically instead of performing, to act courageously instead of hiding safely. This is the work. This is the path. This is what transformation actually looks like when you strip away all the spiritual bypassing and self-help platitudes and positive thinking nonsense. It's dark, it's hard, it's terrifying, but it's real, and it works. And it's the only thing that does work when you're finally tired of running, finally ready to face reality, finally willing to take ownership of your life. The monster you created is standing in front of you. Stop running. Face it. Own it. Transform it. Your life is waiting on the other side. Now go. Start now. Face your creation. Alright, we've gone deep. We've explored the darkest corners of psychology and self-creation. And if you stayed with me this far, if you're still here, still listening, still absorbing, that tells me something important about you. It tells me you're serious about transformation. You're not here for entertainment. You're here because something in you knows it's time to face what you've been avoiding. So here's what I need from you right now. Like this video if you haven't already. That simple action is you making a statement. I'm done running. I'm ready to face my shadow. Then comment below. Tell me what you're finally ready to face. What have you been avoiding that you know you need to confront? Name it. Bring it into the light. And subscribe to this channel because this is just the beginning. We're building a community of people who refuse to live in avoidance, who face their shadows, who take radical ownership of what they've created. Subscribe and commit to this path with us. Do it now. Your future self will thank you. Now, let's talk about what happens after you face it. Because here's what a lot of people don't understand. Facing your shadow, integrating what you've been avoiding, taking ownership of what you created. This isn't a one-time event. It's not something you do once and then you're done. It's a practice, a discipline, a continuous process of becoming more conscious, more integrated, more whole. Your shadow doesn't disappear when you face it once. It transforms. It becomes something you can work with instead of something that works against you. But it's still there. New shadows form as you grow, as you encounter new situations, as you face new fears. This is normal. This is how psychology works. The goal isn't to eliminate your shadow. That's impossible. The goal is to develop the capacity to notice when you're falling into avoidance patterns and course correct quickly. This is what mastery looks like. Not perfection, not the absence of fear or avoidance or unconscious patterns, but the ability to catch yourself faster, to recognize the old patterns when they show up, to interrupt them before they gain momentum, to choose differently before the consequences accumulate. In the beginning, you might go months or years in an avoidance pattern before you recognize it. Then maybe weeks, then days. As you develop awareness and practice facing instead of avoiding, the time between falling into the pattern and recognizing it shrinks. Eventually, you can catch yourself in the moment. You feel the impulse to avoid and you recognize it immediately for what it is. And in that recognition you have choice. This is freedom. Not the freedom from having difficult patterns or fears or shadows, but the freedom to recognize them quickly and choose differently. The freedom to interrupt the pattern before it takes over. The freedom to face instead of avoid. To integrate instead of suppress. To transform instead of being controlled. And this freedom compounds. Every time you choose to face instead of avoid, you're reinforcing new neural pathways. You're creating new patterns. You're training your nervous system that facing is possible, that you can handle discomfort. That growth is more important than comfort. And those new patterns become stronger while the old avoidance patterns become weaker. Over time, facing what scares you becomes more natural than avoiding it. Not because it stops being scary, but because you build so much evidence that you can handle it. Not because avoidance stops being tempting, but because you've experienced so clearly how much worse avoidance makes everything. Not because transformation becomes easy, but because you've made it a practice, a discipline, something you do consistently regardless of how you feel about it. This is what it means to live consciously. This is what it means to take ownership of your psychological life. This is what it means to be the creator of your experience instead of the victim of it. And here's what happens as this becomes your way of being. Your relationship with fear fundamentally changes. Fear stops being something that controls you and becomes information. It's data. It's a signal. Sometimes it's useful. It's telling you something is actually dangerous and you should be careful. But most of the time, especially in modern life. It's just your nervous system responding to psychological discomfort as if it were physical danger. And once you understand that distinction, once you can recognize when fear is protecting you versus when it's just trying to keep you comfortable, you can work with it instead of being controlled by it. You start to recognize fear as a compass pointing toward growth. The things that scare you most are often the things you most need to do, not because difficulty is valuable for its own sake, but because the things we avoid most persistently are usually the things that matter most deeply. We don't avoid things we don't care about. We avoid things that matter so much that the possibility of failing at them feels unbearable. So when you feel that intense resistance, that deep fear, that strong avoidance impulse, instead of treating it as a stop sign, you start treating it as an indicator. This matters. This is important. This is where growth is possible. And you move toward it instead of away from it. This doesn't mean being reckless. This doesn't mean ignoring legitimate danger. This doesn't mean doing things that are genuinely harmful just because they're scary. Discernment is crucial, but it does mean questioning your fear instead of automatically obeying it. It means asking whether this fear is protecting you or constraining you. It means being honest about whether you're avoiding something because it's dangerous or because it's uncomfortable. And most of the time, if you're honest, you'll find it's the latter. Most of what we avoid isn't actually dangerous. It's just uncomfortable. It threatens our ego, our self-image, our sense of control. It requires us to be vulnerable, to risk failure, to potentially look foolish. But it's not going to kill us. It's not even going to harm us, not really. It's just going to make us uncomfortable. And we've been trained to avoid discomfort at all costs, to prioritize feeling comfortable over growing, to choose the familiar over the transformative. But when you start practicing facing your fears, when you deliberately choose discomfort as a path to growth, something shifts in your relationship with life itself. You stop being so afraid of being afraid. You stop needing life to be easy or comfortable or safe. You start developing what the Stoics call the morphati, love of fate, not in the sense of passive acceptance, but in the sense of embracing life as it actually is, with all its challenges and discomforts and difficulties, and seeing those things as opportunities instead of obstacles. This is psychological anti-fragility. This is becoming someone who doesn't just survive challenges, but actually grows stronger through them. This is the transformation that happens when you consistently face what scares you instead of avoiding it. And the benefits extend far beyond just feeling more confident or capable. Your relationships improve because you're no longer avoiding difficult conversations or hiding parts of yourself. Your work improves because you're willing to take risks and face potential failure. Your health improves because you're no longer using substances or behaviors or distractions to numb what you don't want to feel. Your sense of meaning deepens because you're living authentically instead of performing. Every area of life improves when you stop running and start facing. But again, and I can't emphasize this enough, this requires consistent practice. This requires making the choice to face instead of avoid, not just once, not just when you're inspired or motivated, but over and over, especially when you don't feel like it, especially when avoidance seems easier. This is discipline. This is what it actually means to work on yourself. Not reading books, or watching videos, or thinking about your problems, but actually choosing differently in the moment when the old pattern wants to reassert itself. Actually doing the hard thing when everything in you wants to take the easy path. Actually facing what scares you when avoidance is right there, familiar and comfortable. That's the work. That's the practice. That's what transforms your life. So where does this leave you? Right here, right now, with a choice. You can close this video and go back to your patterns. You can understand everything I've said intellectually and do nothing about it. You can agree with the philosophy and continue avoiding in practice. That's one path. The familiar path. The comfortable path. The path of continued suffering disguised as safety. Or you can choose differently. You can take what you've heard here and actually apply it. You can identify the thing you've been avoiding and face it today. You can recognize the pattern and interrupt it. You can feel the fear and act anyway. That's the other path. The uncertain path. The uncomfortable path. The path of growth and transformation and actually becoming who you're capable of being. Both paths are available to you right now, this moment. The question is, which one are you going to choose? Because here's the final truth I want to leave you with. You're going to face what you've been avoiding eventually. Everyone does, either consciously, voluntarily, on your own terms, or unconsciously, involuntarily, when life forces you to, either as a practice of growth or as a crisis of necessity, either while you still have agency and control, or after everything has fallen apart. But you'll face it. The only question is when, and under what circumstances. So why not now? Why not on your terms? Why not while you can still manage the process? Why not before the consequences become catastrophic? What are you actually protecting by continuing to avoid? What are you actually gaining by running? What are you actually accomplishing by feeding the monster instead of facing it? Nothing. The answer is nothing. Avoidance never protects you from what you're afraid of. It just delays the confrontation while making it worse. It just gives your fears more time to grow. It just ensures that when you finally have to face what you've been running from, it will be bigger, scarier, more powerful than it needed to be. Stop protecting the pattern. Stop defending the avoidance. Stop justifying the fear. Just stop. Turn around. Face it. Own it. Transform it. Over time, facing what scares you becomes more natural than avoiding it. Not because it stops being scary, but because you've built so much evidence that you can handle it. Not because avoidance stops being tempting, but because you've experienced so clearly how much worse avoidance makes everything. Not because transformation becomes easy, but because you've made it a practice, a discipline, something you do consistently regardless of how you feel about it. This is what it means to live consciously. This is what it means to take ownership of your psychological life. This is what it means to be the creator of your experience instead of the victim of it. And here's what happens as this becomes your way of being. Your relationship with fear fundamentally changes. Fear stops being something that controls you and becomes information. It's data. It's a signal. Sometimes it's useful. It's telling you something is actually dangerous and you should be careful. But most of the time, especially in modern life, it's just your nervous system responding to psychological discomfort as if it were physical danger. And once you understand that distinction, once you can recognize when fear is protecting you versus when it's just trying to keep you comfortable, you can work with it instead of being controlled by it. You start to recognize fear as a compass pointing toward growth. The things that scare you most are often the things you most need to do. Not because difficulty is valuable for its own sake, but because the things we avoid most persistently are usually the things that matter most deeply. We don't avoid things we don't care about. We avoid things that matter so much that the possibility of failing at them feels unbearable. So when you feel that intense resistance, that deep fear, that strong avoidance impulse, instead of treating it as a stop sign, you start treating it as an indicator. This matters. This is important. This is where growth is possible. And you move toward it instead of away from it. This doesn't mean being reckless. This doesn't mean ignoring legitimate danger. This doesn't mean doing things that are genuinely harmful just because they're scary. Discernment is crucial, but it does mean questioning your fear instead of automatically obeying it. It means asking whether this fear is protecting you or constraining you. It means being honest about whether you're avoiding something because it's dangerous or because it's uncomfortable. And most of the time, if you're honest, you'll find it's the latter. Most of what we avoid isn't actually dangerous. It's just uncomfortable. It threatens our ego, our self-image, our sense of control. It requires us to be vulnerable, to risk failure, to potentially look foolish. But it's not going to kill us. It's not even going to harm us, not really. It's just going to make us uncomfortable. And we've been trained to avoid discomfort at all costs, to prioritize feeling comfortable over growing, to choose the familiar over the transformative. But when you start practicing facing your fears, when you deliberately choose discomfort as a path to growth, something shifts in your relationship with life itself. You stop being so afraid of being afraid. You stop needing life to be easy or comfortable or safe. You start developing what the Stoics call the more fati, love of fate, not in the sense of passive acceptance, but in the sense of embracing life as it actually is, with all its challenges and discomforts and difficulties, and seeing those things as opportunities instead of obstacles. This is psychological anti-fragility. This is becoming someone who doesn't just survive challenges, but actually grows stronger through them. This is the transformation that happens when you consistently face what scares you instead of avoiding it. And the benefits extend far beyond just feeling more confident or capable. Your relationships improve because you're no longer avoiding difficult conversations or hiding parts of yourself. Your work improves because you're willing to take risks and face potential failure. Your health improves because you're no longer using substances or behaviors or distractions to numb what you don't want to feel. Your sense of meaning deepens because you're living authentically instead of performing. Every area of life improves when you stop running and start facing. But again, and I can't emphasize this enough, this requires consistent practice. This requires making the choice to face instead of avoid, not just once, not just when you're inspired or motivated, but over and over, especially when you don't feel like it, especially when avoidance seems easier. This is discipline. This is what it actually means to work on yourself. Not reading books, or watching videos, or thinking about your problems, but actually choosing differently in the moment when the old pattern wants to reassert itself. Actually doing the hard thing when everything in you wants to take the easy path. Actually facing what scares you when avoidance is right there, familiar and comfortable. That's the work. That's the practice. That's what transforms your life. So where does this leave you? Right here, right now, with a choice. You can close this video and go back to your patterns. You can understand everything I've said intellectually and do nothing about it. You can agree with the philosophy and continue avoiding in practice. That's one path, the familiar path, the comfortable path, the path of continued suffering disguised as safety. Or you can choose differently. You can take what you've heard here and actually apply it. You can identify the thing you've been avoiding and face it today. You can recognize the pattern and interrupt it. You can feel the fear and act anyway. That's the other path, the uncertain path, the uncomfortable path, the path of growth and transformation, and actually becoming who you're capable of being. Both paths are available to you, right now, this moment. The question is, which one are you going to choose? Because here's the final truth I want to leave you with. You're going to face what you've been avoiding eventually. Everyone does, either consciously, voluntarily, on your own terms, or unconsciously, involuntarily, when life forces you to, either as a practice of growth, or as a crisis of necessity, either while you still have agency and control, or after everything has fallen apart. But you'll face it. The only question is when, and under what circumstances. So why not now? Why not on your terms? Why not while you can still manage the process? Why not before the consequences become catastrophic? What are you actually protecting by continuing to avoid? What are you actually gaining by running? What are you actually accomplishing by feeding the monster instead of facing it? Nothing. The answer is nothing. Avoidance never protects you from what you're afraid of. It just delays the confrontation while making it worse. It just gives your fears more time to grow. It just ensures that when you finally have to face what you've been running from, it will be bigger, scarier, more powerful than it needed to be. Stop protecting the pattern. Stop defending the avoidance. Stop justifying the fear. Just stop. Turn around. Face it. Own it. Transform it.